Hi, I'm Dana Repp. I'm an adjunct artist with Elements of Education. I teach a class called History Connects for SAMI in partnership with Fort Nisqually Living History Museum. And today we're going to learn some basic beginnings sewing techniques and make yourself a market bag. It is the cousin to today's backpack. They were used in the 19th century for carrying anything from your lunch to your personal belongings or even things you went and got from the market. The larger ones were made the same style as this. This is just a little rectangle. It's got an opening right here, and you're able to slip this one, this size that we'll make today, will slip on one side. You can slide a cell phone in, the other one you can put your wallet in. You can twist it to keep it from going anywhere, and you can slide it into a belt. In the 19th century, they took these larger ones, twisted them, and they threw them over their shoulder as a way to keep your hands free while you were carrying items to and from wherever you were going. The supplies you'll need are a piece of fabric 21 inches long by 7 inches wide. You can use a pattern fabric with a coordinating thread, like these are. For my purposes today, I will be using white muslin with a contrasting thread so that you're able to see my stitches easily on camera. Fabric scissors. Do not use paper scissors. If you are using them, they will be too dull for your fabric and will tend to just chew it up instead of cut it. I use pinking shears as well for one of the steps in the end of the product. I don't know if you can see that really well in this camera, but the little jagged edges right here makes a zigzag edge on the end of your fabric. I use little snips as well as I go along. You don't need them if you've got a pair of scissors. You'll definitely need a sewing needle. Pins, I use a metal dish that has a big magnet on the bottom. I have a tendency to drop pins and I don't like to find them in my foot later, so this is very helpful. You'll also need wax for your thread. An iron is helpful. If you don't have an iron, you can use something like a wood wedge. I sanded this down just to a sharp edge so that I can crease my fabric by running it along there. If you don't have either of those things, you can also use your fingers. They did that a lot in the 19th century. A ruler and a pencil. Optional thing also is to use a thimble. Lots of people use metal thimbles. They love them. They're wonderful. I don't personally like them all that much. They hurt my hands. So I tend to use a leather thimble. You can find these in the store as well. Since I'm making my market bag to use during interpreting 19th century life, I need to use natural fibers like cotton, linen, wool, hemp. Because that's what they had available to them. They didn't have man-made fibers yet. What's also interesting is that in the 19th century, people were around open fires for cooking and working, and these fibers are all naturally flame retardant or resistant. Cotton, linen, and hemp will burn, but they can be quickly and easily extinguished, and wool tends to snuff itself out. I'm going to show you a little fiber test so you can see what I'm talking about. I'm going to use a small piece of linen, piece of cotton, a piece of wool, and a piece of man-made fiber, which I believe is acetate. I know these are a little bit difficult to see. I'll start with the linen, and I'm going to put it into the flame. Let it catch. It's burning, but I can blow it out. And then I just touch the edge, and all of this comes off just like ash. It disappears in my hand. The edge of this is very smooth. It's just been burned, okay? It has no smell to it at all. Or more of just a smoky smell, not any other fiber content to it. This is cotton. Do the same thing to it. Sometimes when you're burning cottons, you have to make sure you've washed them first because they tend to put sizing in them. And when they put the sizing in them, it can lend some flammability to the product. Just take that because it's smoky. Again, the same result. It's just turned to char in my hand. You see the black soot on my fingers. There's a very smooth edge. Nothing pilling up on it or anything like that. These are good fibers to use for your everyday clothing. They're really comfortable. They breathe well. Now, wool has a different response to the flame, as I told you before. I'm going to put it in here. Sometimes it takes it a little while to catch. Got it to catch. But it put itself out. Maybe. Kind of burns. And then it goes out. The edge on this is ash. You can see it just coming apart like ash in my fingers. No pilling or anything. smells like burnt hair because it's animal hair. It comes from a sheep. Then we have this acetate. This is what gets blended in with a lot of cottons today. So that's why we burn test. If I'm making an apron for myself and I'm working over an open fire, I want to make sure that it's cotton or wool or a natural fiber and doesn't have anything like this in it, because this can still catch fire even if it was just a blend. So I'll show you what it does. It just melts and it burns like a candle. I did blow it out, which was fine. I'm not sure if you can see it, but if you see that little glob right there, that's the plastic that's melted in it. I don't want to touch it when it's hot. It's cooled off now. But it doesn't, it comes off in one big blob. This is, and it's hard. I can't make it go to ash in my fingers. This is not what we want. There's other fabrics that are even worse than this. I've had some that I can't even get the flame to go out. I have to throw them in the water, and they can stick really badly to your skin and cause burns. So, do you know what was the first man-made fiber? It was rayon, and it was made in the early 1890s, made from wood pulp and other plant fibers, and it was used as a substitute for silk. I think mainly an answer to the large growing middle class due to the Industrial Revolution. People had more money, they wanted nicer things, but the middle class couldn't really afford what the aristocracy could afford at that time. So this was a great answer for that. Today, we still use rayon as an inexpensive replacement for silk, or in addition to other fabrics that we use. It gives them great drape, meaning they're kind of flowy or they have a lot of body to them, and also makes them wrinkle resistant, so we can just pop them out of the dryer and wear them and not have to spend 20 minutes ironing our shirt every day. So to begin our sewing project, we're going to use our seam allowance of 5/8 inches. It's the most common seam allowance used when you're sewing, and you'll find it a lot in sewing patterns. You can mark your ruler if you're not real comfortable with seeing 5/8 inch on it. That way you can see it really readily when you lay it up to the fabric edge. You can see where 5/8 inches is. This is the fabric real estate, though, that you need so that your stitches won't unravel your fabric. Today's modern clothing is often serged on the edges, and so it's a machine that uses 3 to 4 threads that sew a finished edge on there, and it also cuts the fabric as it goes along. We're not doing that because we're hand sewing today, so we don't have that option. So if you look at your shirting of your clothing, you'll notice that there's a stitching line, and then there's some fabric beyond that. This right here, from like if we sew this part to here, this is our seam allowance, and we're going to need that today, especially because we're going to finish off our work so that it looks really tidy and clean on the inside. In the mid-19th century, sewing machines were not as easily obtained as they would have been by the end of that century. Like any new product, they're generally more expensive in the beginning, and many people couldn't readily afford them. But women saved in order to have one, because you could fix or complete a dress about 5 times faster than sewing by hand. So it was definitely motivational. When we sew, almost everything you do is going to be inside out and sometimes upside down. You'll want to fold your fabric on the long edge. I'm going to use this pattern fabric right now so that you can see what I'm doing. This is the pattern. This is the right side. This is the side I want people to see when I'm finished. This is the wrong side. Not very pretty, but this is where I'll be working and doing all of my stitching so that it won't be seen later on once we get done. I'm going to go back to my white fabric, which is what we're going to use today. So I take my fabric and I want to fold it along the long edge. So there's 21 by 7, fold it long ways. So it's a long, skinny kind of tube. And then mark the center. I know mine's 22 inches, so on the 11 I mark it. You can also just fold it in half and mark that center as well. Once you've done that, what you'll do, show you the magic of having done it before, is there's my center mark right there. I hope you can see that. Try to make it really dark. Does that show it? A little bit. There we go. Measure 3 inches on either side of that. So over here, I'm going to do 3 inches, make a nice dark mark. Yours don't have to be that dark. I'm doing mine exceptionally dark so that you can see it. For your own, this is just enough color on there so that you can figure out where to start and where to stop. This is the area right in here where your opening to the bag is going to be. Like on this little bag here, this is its opening. And if you sew that shut, it won't be a bag, it'll be, I don't know, a tube of some sort. What I have my students do sometimes is I put a big X in there. Now these markings aren't going to show once you've sewn this up. Also, pencil washes out of just about every fabric, especially cotton, which is what I'm making here today. Once you've made your 3-inch marks on each side of center, we've got our bag folded in half. When I'm teaching my students to sew, I teach them to start out making 8-inch stitches. Making them even smaller is more period. The better sewer you are, the smaller you'll make your stitches. But 1/8 inch is really good for the beginning sewer. At the first several inches of their product here, I have them mark 8-inch hash marks along the fabric. I put my ruler down and take my pencil, and I have them mark the first 2 or 3 inches or so. This will show them where to bring their needle in and then where to bring their needle out. It's a cheat sheet for right on your fabric, but since it's not going to show, this is a great way to have a better product when you're finished. The other thing I have them mark next is I have them measure down 5/8 inch, which is our seam allowance. Measure that down, and then I make a couple of marks on either side, and then do a nice dark line for you guys. But for your own purposes, your line again can be a little bit lighter. You just want something you can follow. This line that I just made right here, this is your stitch line. You're going to sew right along that line at those intervals. You can bring those intervals all the way down here if you need to, if you want to make your marks that small. You'll do that on both ends from your 3-inch mark out. Once you've made those marks, this is where our pins come in handy. We're going to pin it. I like to pin vertically. Some people like horizontally. You do whatever makes you comfortable. I start off pinning vertically right here at my 3-inch mark, and then my other 3-inch mark. Sometimes I use a different colored pin there, or I use 2 pins to indicate to myself when I'm sewing and watching TV or not paying attention and talking, so that I know when to stop and I don't sew on past where I want to be. Now we're going to thread our needle. You'll start off by grabbing about 36 inches of thread. Start at this shoulder, end at your hand. It's not rocket science, just get close. 36 inches will work. We don't want it much longer than that because your thread will have a tendency to catch and knot up, which is awful to deal with. Grab your needle and then thread your needle through. If your thread won't go through your needle very easily, just simply clip it off at an angle with your scissors, and that will make it have a little better point to go through your needle. So now I've got my needle threaded, and you're going to double it over, so you'll have 2 pieces of thread. So you double the ends up, keep the needle here in the center, and double these up. Make your ends kind of even. I'm going to show you a way to tie a knot in your thread so that it doesn't require you spitting and slobbering all over your thread. I hope you can see this. Start by putting your needle straight up like a post and lay the 2 thread ends in front of it between your thumb and the needle itself and bring it out so it's kind of short. Then you're going to take this and go around the back 2-3 times and then lay it right back down between your thumb and the needle itself. You don't have to pinch it very hard. Then what I do is I kind of keep these fingers in between this loop that I have made. You can see that. It's really hard to see, I know. But if you keep your fingers in that loop, take your other hand and then just keep your nails and your fingernails kind of on the thread. Run this all the way up and then let it go as you get too close to the end of the loop. And you have a nice, tidy knot tied in your thread. You see that? See that little tiny knot right there? It's right at the end of my thread. If your tail a little bit too long than that, you can trim it down with some scissors as well. But this is a nice way to get a knot without having to do a lot of spitting on your hands and fingers and thread. And in light of today's situation, that would probably be very, very preferable. Begin at whichever edge is your sewing hand. I'm right-handed, so I'm going to start on the right side. If I'm a lefty, start from your left side. You want to be able to be pushing your needle through the fabric, not pulling it, because then it's always awkward. You're always working backwards to what's intuitive for you. So I'm a right-handed person when I sew, which is kind of strange because I am a left-handed person when I write. One other thing I forgot to tell you just now is this wax that I showed you earlier, this is where we need it. We're going to wax our thread. Lay your thread over it, run it through the wax. You can run it through a couple of times. You don't need it caked on, but it helps the thread, as you see, become a little more rigid and stiff, and it stays together closes up those fibers, makes your thread a little bit stronger, helps keep it from knotting up on your work. You're going to start right here on our sewing line that we made, and we're going to take the first nip is going to come through the back and just straight up. Okay, that's the last time you're going to see the back of your fabric. You're always going to work with the front of your fabric facing you and your needle on this side. You're going to go in one stitch and rock your needle and bring it back up at the 1/8 inch mark. In and back up. We're going to continue on down that line. You can move your needle back and forth to get the right length. This works great having these marks here. You can follow them in the beginning. I only have my students do the first couple of inches because by the time they get to inch 3, they can see it, and there's no need to keep following these hash marks. It's kind of tedious work to get a short project done. So what I'm going to have you do is continue to sew until you get up to that double pin before our opening. Now that I've gotten to the end, I'm going to remove those 2 pins. So I know to stop. I'm not going to sew my little X'd out area here. What you'll do is, I've got a nice long piece of thread still on my needle. I'm just going to come back and take the tiniest little nip of fabric, just a few strands. Make a really tiny stitch. And then you have this loop. See that loop? Nice circle there. You can pick whichever direction you want to go, in the back or in the front. Just make it, your needle go through the same direction twice, and gently give that a pull, a little tug, and now you've tied it off. And that gives you a nice sturdy knot so it'll stay put. Then you clip your thread, and that's your first edge. Now that we've finished sewing the 2 sides from the 3 inch mark to the end of our edge, they're all nice and tidy. See the stitches there? Nice tidy little even stitches. What we're going to do is take it to our ironing board and press this. Now I've ironed it flat, but we're going to make a little change here. So the next move is to open up these 2 ends and set this edge that you just sewed down the center of it. And then we're going to lay this seam open all the way down the edge here, all the way down. So we'll start with that. We'll open this up, and we want to press that stitch open all the way down. And I'll take my pins in my pin dish again, and we're going to start pinning this. Doesn't matter, you can pin all the way through the whole thing, front to back. It's not going to make a difference at this point. You just want to hold this in place so that your little seam right here doesn't come undone. So you can see, just continue this all the way down to the other end until we get both sides done. Now we're going to come back and we're going to finish this inside edge right here with a whip stitch. I've got my thread, it's knotted, it's been waxed, and what I start with is right this little lip right here. Start with your thread just underneath that lip, okay? Pull that under and hide your tail underneath there. Then what you do is you're going to take, instead of doing 1/8 inch stitches, we're going to do 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch stitches. The first stitch I take, it's a tiny bite. You want to make sure you're only getting this first layer of fabric in there. You don't want this under fabric caught in this because it will sew your bag completely shut all the way down the whole line. So what you want to do is pull this up and through. So this is our first stitch. It's going to be a little bit closer and tighter because we want to get it anchored in. Take it here, go in crossways, just barely pick up a little bit of this fabric here on this bottom piece, and then take a nip out of the folded edge right up here and pull through. See how long that is? These don't have to be really tiny, tight stitches. It's just to get the fabric closed and finish off this edge to make it look tidy and give you a nice finished product. I'll do one more here. So you can see that. I'm laying down. This happens a lot. Get it caught, just pull it back up to the front. So as you can see, I've now got all my whip stitching done right here. See all those little railroad lines right there? Goes all the way down to the other end, as you can see there. Kind of petered off there. Fabric got a little bit short. I didn't watch my seam allowances close as I wanted to right there. Not the end of the world. The one thing that's important is that the inside pocket or the opening of the pocket, the placket here is open, and the finished is a finished edge. So if you're reaching your hand in here and rubbing against this as you use it, it's not going to come undone and come unfrayed. You can see a little bit of my stitching on this side because I use black thread on white fabric. If I use white thread, you would hardly notice this at all. What we're going to do now is finish off our ends, and so we can close up the bag so that it's a useful bag. So in order to finish off our ends here, 5/8 inch seam allowance, pull my needle through. You can do a little bit narrow, 4/8 if you want to. We won't be doing a run and fell seam or whipping the ends of it over to finish this end off because it adds a lot of bulk. I don't want that much bulk in these corners when I get ready to turn it. Corners are where you get a lot of fabric because you've got two ends meeting up. So when you turn it right side out, it would get too bulky. We'll just sew straight across this, like so. When the fabric's a little thicker, like right here, I tend to take less stitches on my needle at one time. It's a little easier on my fingers. So we get to the end, and we're going to tie this off. Take a little nip, put your needle through the loop twice, going the same direction so you don't undo what you just did. Tie it, clip it. Pinking shears, this is where they come in. They have a short little roll here, but they do work really well for what we're doing. And then you pink the end, and you have your finished bag with two pinked ends like this. So that nice jagged edge, that'll keep it from fraying. Now what you do is you'll reach in and you'll turn your bag right side out. Oh, got a thread right here that needs to be clipped. Hold. Sometimes you'll get some threads that are long if you don't clip them well enough. And this is your market bag. The bag's right side out, and I took it back to the ironing board and pressed it again. And so this is a finished market bag. You now have a little usable object here, but you can also use these same stitches for other projects as well. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day.